Hello, everyone. This is Michaela from Joy Inc., and you're listening to the End All the Things podcast. As a life coach and facilitator, I work with individuals and groups to empower their best selves to shine to the betterment of all involved. My goal is always to bring you closer to trusting the voice inside of you that is authentically yours. My job here is no different. In my journey through life, I continue to meet people who use their authenticity, their gifts, to grow, change, and serve through professional and personal endeavors. These people and their stories become my gift to you, for I cannot keep a good thing to myself, and I believe that they may inspire a part of your story to evolve. Today, friends, you and I get to enjoy a conversation with Kim Spangler and All the Things. Kim is the founder and head designer at Branches and Blooms Design, as well as owner of Branches and Blooms Farm. Through both endeavors, which, by the way, are side businesses, she keeps her focus on sustainable farming and designing premium florals with a smile on her face. Her designs are exquisite, and having seen her work firsthand, from start to finish, my friends, she is all in for the win. During our conversation, Kim ties her experience working for the government in, well, among other things, environmentally friendly explosives, with her experience as an entrepreneur and her life as a mom to a neurodivergent child into a story about process and structure, coupled with curiosity and creativity. We get a peek behind the curtain to life working in DC, some solid parenting strategies, and so much more. And hello, Kim. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on End All the Things. It is wonderful to have you here because I am so curious to learn more about you. I only had the opportunity to first meet you in September when we worked together on a wedding that was absolutely incredible. The couple was dynamite. And I show up as the wedding officiant, and I'm super excited, super pumped. I meet this cranky woman who's going to be organizing the day. I walk further into the room, and there is Kim Spangler. And she was like, not only refreshing, but honest and gritty, and I fell in love immediately. So Kim Spangler is the owner of Branches and Blooms, where they do floral design, sustainable farming, and all manner of beautiful things, while honoring our earth, which is super important to me and should be important to all of you. So as I got to know Kim that day, what I found out is that she's not just, that was my dog shaking. She's not just a floral designer. She has a lot of really incredible hats that she wears. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Kim, and tell us who you are and what else you do in this world.
Yeah, so thank you for the kind introduction. And that was a magical day, punctuated by some moments of comic relief from some folks that were a little grumpy. So
right, you gotta roll with it, right?
You gotta roll with it. It's not my first rodeo with that. But yeah, as you mentioned, so I am a small business owner. I would say that I own two businesses right now. I have my floral design business that we've had since 2017. And then we started up our farm last year. So we're getting ready to enter season 2 of Branches and Blooms Farm, which sounds like and is really truly like the reality show that it sounds. So my day job is I'm a scientist. I went to school for biochemistry and chemistry, and through a couple good and fortunate situations in my career, I have found myself leading the Department of Defense's research and development for environmental and installation energy and water. And so it's an awesome role. I'm not speaking in my professional capacity here, but certainly it's been a career dream come true.
So what does one do in that position? Because as I've said to you before, I've never met anyone who does that job. So you're a scientist and you're an environmentalist. And what do you do to blend all of that in this way?
So it's interesting. I came to sustainability very organically. As
Which
much
is
as I love,
apropos, right?
apropos, yes. So as much as I love sustainability, I also love a good value. And as I've progressed in both my side businesses and my career, I've come to understand that sustainability is something that we seek when we are in a more austere environment. And so um, I've traveled out west quite a bit for my job, and it's interesting. I primarily grew up on the East Coast. We have abundant resources here. We have rain, we have electrical grids, we have 5 grocery stores within a very short driving
We have
distance.
all the things at our
We
fingertips.
literally, yes, have all the things. And when you
And we
move,
forget that the rest of the country doesn't have it quite like that.
no, and uh, notably, I was living in Washington, D.C. during the 2008 recession. I was so poor I didn't notice there was a recession because I was in graduate school, but largely Washington, D.C. got insulated from that. And so it's
Right.
just interesting to see where you're at different times in your life or where you visited, how, you just become very in tune with your own perspective.
Right.
So,
Well, you get very comfortable with it, right? When you know what
totally.
you know what you know. And I have found in my coaching practice, in my everyday life, that the minute I think I know something, it means I have something else to learn.
Exactly.
Right. And that, and I
Exactly.
should want that.
Right.
So yeah, agreed, 100%.
Right. So, so in my floral design business, I had these clients that wanted these wonderful weddings, and I was the one that had to often break the bad news that, you're asking for something that's in a budget that's not does not comport with your budget that you have, right?
Right.
And so I worked very hard very early on in my business to make sure that I could deliver a complete and purposeful vision to my clients at a price point that was important to them in their lives. I'm not an upseller. I want to give someone a great vision. I'm not going to let you go out with an incomplete wedding.
Right.
And I'm certainly going to charge for my skills and my time and the time of myself as a farmer and the other farmers that I work with. What I came to find is that actually running a floral design business that's sustainable was a great way to bring value to my clients and a great way to bring value to myself.
And that changes it from your whole explanation here of, wanting to bring value. And if I can't serve you in this way, I'm not going to, half-ass it, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And that value is super important, right?
Yes.
So I don't know. It's just, it's wonderful to see small business owners not only finding passion, but going beyond a transactional existence, right? You could sell your product, but what does that say about the value? What does that say about the quality? And then to go back, you believe in sustainability. How is that a sustainable business plan for you?
Exactly.
To continue to deliver value time over time. So absolutely. I love that. And having seen them firsthand, I can say you do deliver. And it is all, watching you work. It was like watching a machine, right? The project manager in you, I could see just going for it and challenging and questioning and which way do we do? And how is that? How do you use science then? And I'm going to go back and have you explain what you do, what your job description means. But we want so much to just be one thing, right? Like our economy, the last 100 years, we've got this corporate mentality of, the company man and keep going. This business of yours came as an inspiration to kind of quell some of that grind and go, right? What is it about, how do you bring the science into that, right? Obviously with the farming, but what role does science play in driving that passion into your business?
So There's a lot of ways, and I was actually reading something last night, and so this is a theme with me, is I'm just a vacuum of information. But
I love it.
um, there was something that said that folks that did okay, or were somewhat successful, were good analogizers, or folks that could make analogies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized at that point that so much of what I do is about, like, okay, I've been in a situation. What's analogous about that situation that I can then apply to this somewhat unknown situation that I'm in right now? And that all ties together. So as a scientist, most things are unknown. Um, when I was in graduate school, I learned a very hard lesson very quickly, that um, you can't just make something work. No matter how hard you want to make it work, sometimes it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more about being, I mean, you're still trying to drill down to a final and complete product, which is the same thing with a floral design or a wedding. Mm-hmm. But what you're working with are variables that are ever shifting and ever changing. And so with the wedding business, I want to say, and I don't want to say that I approach my weddings as an experiment, because that's not true.
Right.
But I allow that there's going to be some variables that pop up, and I can go with them. Mm-hmm. And it could be very stressful, mm-hmm. but you have to go into it knowing that there's going to be stress, and you need to just say, this is part of the process.
And I think you just nailed it. It is the process, right? It's whether you're in kindergarten trying to figure something out blocks, or navigating bumps in the road of everyday life, or working in explosives, or building a floral arrangement, right? It's, what is the process? And there is a scientific process, tried and true, that can be applied to nearly any situation, right? And it's the way you described the analogies and how to apply what you know to the conditions you're in. Number one, you just nailed what should be the goal of our education system: how to teach people to critically think. I know A and B are similar. Well, X and A, do they have anything in common? And how do I apply that to get closer to B? However you want to, maybe that didn't make sense with my letters and all.
Made sense to the scientist.
Right? You could draw a correlation there.
I could draw a correlation.
But it's that is the work I do, right? It's what data do you need to make a good call, right? If it didn't go the way you wanted, great. How do we try again? Because learning doesn't happen by getting it right the first time, right? So to your point earlier, yeah, you're going to give them a fair price, but you're going to get paid for your time and experience. And that means grad school. That means, everything that you've done career-wise after that, how you've learned to manage and process. And we'll hop back real quick to the Department of Defense, because a friend of mine also worked there, and he said something to me one time. He used to do consulting for them. So he would work with like generals and like really big, important people making really big, important decisions. And what he said that they talked a lot about was, we can't change the conditions on the field, right? Or wherever they are, but we can make them suck less, right? Like we can make it work for us. So in that way, can you tell us, is that true of your experience in your career? Is that the mentality there? What does that saying ring true for you?
Yes, 100%. So, I mean, you could turn on the news at any point in time of the day, because it runs 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And I mean, unfortunately, and I think rarely are you getting rarely are you getting a positive picture of government, right? It's very easy to talk about government's failings. Mm-hmm. And what I enjoyed quickly from the outset of working in the government was, this is a big system. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed trying to find my way through that system. And to do that, you have to know what the knowns are, mm-hmm. And use that to create opportunity. And so, I certainly didn't do it on my own. I've had a lot of folks that have helped me in my career. get me in front of the right people I needed to get in front of. But I think because I approached it as an opportunity versus approach it as a burden, that has helped. I also I didn't think I'd be talking about the recession a lot during this, but I finished graduate school right after the recession, and I was just so grateful to have a job. Like, I was so grateful to have a job. So I've never taken for granted my job. And so I've always tried to make absolutely the best out of it. And that doesn't mean there weren't some times that it didn't completely suck. My business is as a result of one time that pretty completely sucked at work.
What happened? Like, what happened there? Did you just come home and say, I'm doing this?
I had something happen that I didn't think was right, and it wasn't managed very well. And I was like, I need something that I can have control over. And so I had my own business where my employee was me, and I forget that that's why the business started at one point, but that's why it started. So I took a crappy situation and, made something positive out of it.
Right. Change the conditions to help
change the conditions
closer to your goals, right? We can't change everything, but we can make some changes. That is
absolutely
for sure. So in your experience in Washington, in the government land, your husband was also in the government land, right? He was a lobbyist. And so you guys really got to see behind the curtains, right?
Oh, we did.
And to your point earlier about what you see in the news, there are good things going on in our government, right? What were some of the highlights that inspire you to continue working in this way, right? When the job can be burdensome, it's can be a matter of life or death. I imagine that's very stressful. What's behind the curtain that keeps you motivated to drive forward in this way?
To me, it's always, and to my husband as well, it's two things. I think one is that it's realizing that people are people. In Washington, D.C., you can get quickly enamored with things. You can get enamored with people. You can get enamored with money. You can certainly get enamored with power. He had a job where, because of his role as a junior staffer in a Senate office, got to work with and meet some pretty influential people. And from that, he just saw that, hey, celebrity X is just a person. They've done some cool things, but they're a person. And so, I've approached that in my career as well, of trying to just, realize that people are people. They're going to have their failings. They're going to have their strengths, and people are people.
Right.
I would say the second thing, though, is that certainly with my husband and with myself, is that we actively and purposefully chose to work with colleagues that are inspiring and that are doing the right thing. And that's a choice, and that's a choice you can make every single day about anything.
Yep. Again, that's influencing your conditions, right?
Exactly.
Yes, I could go into this and go deep into the hole, down that slippery slope. But it sounds like you both had the values and integrity to keep your own true north, filtering out through the noise, which, kudos to you, has given you a sense of compassion for the human behind the celebrity.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, right? Because as a person not in DC, not having that intimacy, it's very easy to feel things about what we hear in the news and to keep ourselves pointed true north. I, for one, don't believe anything I see on TV, right? I go do my digging if it's important to me, but there are so many things out there that I just can't manage them all, right? I can't do the research and vet and proof it out, because they are all human, and they're all going to do good things, and they're all going to do bad things.
Right.
Depending on who's qualified,
Yeah, right. Some people do worse things. Some people don't have a great guiding compass, and that's not just a Washington, D.C. problem. That's an everywhere issue. But
that's why we have a Department of Defense.
Well, so
right, because people are intense, and to your point, when there's money and power involved, it takes it over. So here's my next question. When we talked a few weeks ago, you told me that you like to tie in, probably because your brain is just driven this way, tie in atoms, elements, something to your floral design. What? Tell me
I
about that.
know.
Because I get it now that you've said it and I can't unsee it. So for our listeners, tell us about what it means to craft your floral design scientifically.
This is going to sound so dorky, but I build my floral arrangements as molecules. I said it. I said it. I don't know what to tell you. But again, we go back to analogies. And
Thank you for
so,
saying it, because I think it's really
yes.
cool, right? Like, how do we design this stuff? Yes, there can be like a big, small, whatever, but I think it's really neat to understand the way the brain works and how people listen. Someone out there wants to tie their specialty into their, their expertise, right? Their passion into their expertise. This may be how.
Yeah. So
Design cakes like molecules. I don't know.
exactly. Well, so I mean, so what I did when I was in graduate school was I, through chemistry, built molecules, not models, molecules in 3 dimensions. So you got like a carbon atom here, a hydrogen atom here, a hydrogen atom here. And it's not dissimilar to a flower here, a flower here, a flower here. And so I had taken floral design in college as an elective, and I noted that the designs they were showing us that they had sketched out in the book looked a lot like the designs that I was learning as an organic chemist. And so in 2017, when I was just absolutely hell-bent on learning how to be an expert floral designer, I just started studying pictures of floral design, studying and studying and studying, and then I would go buy the cheapest flowers I could buy because I was in austere conditions at the time. Like, we didn't have a lot of money. I was just trying to get something started, and I would put them together like molecules. And so I would still say that underpins all of my designs. I mean, I have a little more room now for some, ability to work with organic ingredients that are, twisting and aren't perfectly straight carbon to hydrogen bonds. But it still is the underpinnings of fundamental floral design.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And I do look at flowers differently now, thinking about that. I'm gonna have to study up on my molecules for sure.
Oh my gosh. Everyone's gonna be a floral designer now.
Well, I will give it my best, but I don't think I can do what you do, especially because you grow the majority of your own product, right? So you go from a really austere buying the cheapest flowers you can find to make molecule arrangements to fast forward now 6 years to owning your own sustainable farm that provides for your other business. How has that journey gone? Because that's a big step away from DC.
It is. Farming is really, really hard. My day job is hard. Farming is just as hard. Which
what
goes
is
back
it?
to that.
What's the
So the thing about farming that I think is so difficult is that you can change one thing and try something out. And if you mess up, if you're lucky, you get another chance to try it in the season. Mm-hmm. If you're not lucky, which is the majority of the time, you got to wait till next year, right? Because things only grow at certain temperatures. And so,
Talk it's about hard. Conditions and variables and trying to get them just right and not being able to influence it.
Right.
So that must be difficult, especially since, in my recollection, the last few years here in the Northeast have not been overly favorable for our agriculture. How do you start a business under those conditions? Is it just grit? Do you have mentors? What resources are you using to push through those obstacles?
So I'm using every resource I can to push through that. So
atta girl.
Well, so I had the benefit of, I had money from my wedding business to throw into the farm. So my wedding business, it cost me $70 to start. I paid for my license, I paid for my sales tax license, and you don't spend any money on weddings until the client gives you money.
Right.
Farming is all up front,
All front.
and you only get paid at the end. And it's all up front, like a lot of money, like not $70. And so I had cash. I had experience as a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
I have two good friends that were flower farmers that I had worked with as a designer. And so I had seen what they had done. I had been growing on a small scale at our old property. And I have my family. And so I've got my dad's an engineer. My mom helps us so that we can manage our family so that I can do crazy things like start farms. And my husband's into the whole thing.
That's awesome.
And so I had as much backing as anyone can have starting a farm at 39 years old. And it was still so hard. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard again. And so, but this is also the second business I've started. And it's also the 10th job I've had or whatever. So I know that the process is going to be what it is, and I'll get to it. So I read every article I can find. I go searching for information. I throw cash at it if I need to. I go talk to the folks that I know that are just monster flower farmers, just like the best flower. I'm never going to be as good of a flower farmer as they are, but I know that my place right now is in farming and design.
That's incredible. I mean, and throughout the conversation, the foundation, yes, science is the foundation, but remains the same as it's process, right? You are a person who, and I think these are your words, correct me if I'm wrong, but who makes a decision and moves forward. And you chose to pursue passion and to pursue sustainability and to pursue beauty. And I think that's the grit. When you can list off this person helped, I compelled them, I got them involved, because it's not always easy to get people to buy into, I don't know how you said it, but like a crazy vision, right? Where it's going to have to be all hands on deck, picking up the flowers from the venue at midnight. Picking up the kids from here, there, and everywhere. So support is absolutely critical in starting a small business. Absolutely. How has that been? How do you manage your time, right? Like, yes, you've got the support. Yes, people are all in. And while there's time management and how you're going to actually get all the things done, how do you manage yourself? How do you take care of yourself and your energy and the willpower and the drive to follow through on those decisions that you can make and just move forward with?
So I approach it as, and this is all a vision that's coalescing as I'm getting older, but I approach it as it's the end of January. I'm just getting ready to start some seeds. It's really dark outside. I've been booking weddings, but I know I'm not outside grinding till 9 o'clock at night every night. And I'm just taking it as it is because that's the season I'm in. Mm-hmm. So it's all about energy management. I know I need to be able to perform when I need to perform. Mm-hmm. I know in order to do that, I need to physically be in shape. So I exercise. I know I eat well. I watch what I'm, drinking, certainly. Mm-hmm. I watch my sleep. And I really actually think having my day job juxtaposed against my side businesses, they're kind of like active recovery for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
And that it works for me. I mean, I run at a high pace. I've got a lot of energy. I know that I may not have this level of energy for my whole life, but I know I'm at like peak performance right now. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going for it while I can.
I think that's great. And I think what you said, it's the season I'm in. We too often forget that seasons change, right? And that things change, and what we thought we were, we can evolve into something different. We plant the seed, it may not go great. We plant the seed, we get a great harvest. But if we're not present for it, right? Like it sounds like right now you are present for this season where you're not out grinding, literally grinding the fields.
Right.
Um, and then it's to have the awareness in the other seasons of that other season will come back. Let's celebrate this awareness and this presence. Because to your point, if we're watching the news, if we're getting burdened down by all of those things out of our control, those elements that we cannot influence, there's no energy to do the things that are important, right? And if we're not present about where the information is coming from and what our responsibility is in there, right? This is the process. What works, what doesn't work. So it sounds like you are very conscious in how you choose to spend your time. So outside of your day job, outside of your side businesses, you're also a mom and a wife and a person who has interests and desires and passions. What is life like for you outside of your business and career endeavors?
Yeah. So again, they are not, they are all convoluted together. So I'm a mom to a 10-year-old son who's got a rare genetic syndrome, and I'm also a daughter. I'm a mother to a 4-year-old neurotypical daughter.
Okay.
And so that the diagnosis of our son was really probably the most monumental shift we've had in our life that is intertwined with what I've ended up doing career-wise with both my side business and my day job.
So I'm here nodding my head for anyone who's listening, not watching, because I understand that. You said monumental, and we're going to lead into this, but I feel that, right? And we can probably talk about comparative suffering in a minute. And while our experiences are very different, I know that feeling. My son was born with a cleft lip and palate, and where, we're still on the journey. It's way better than I thought it would be, right? But it still broke my heart. It rocked my world. It shifted my direction. Plans changed, hopes changed, so I can understand that, right? Because we can go through life. And at this point in time, I thought I was strong. I thought I had been through things. I thought I had figured out the process. And then everything just stopped and kind of went dark, right? So I can sympathize with that. And I want to lead into this just thanking you for being willing to show up for him and to share a little bit about your journey together with us today, because I think it's important to understand, right? When someone says I have a 4-year-old neurotypical child, it's telling you something about the other child, right? And both of those children have needs that are different, and it's just it's not easy. No. But I see you choosing your hard with him and with her and with all of your people. So I'd like to ask, I have it written down as MECP2 duplicate syndrome.
Duplication syndrome.
Duplication
Close.
syndrome.
Yes.
So that is the diagnosis that your son, who's 10, has. When did that diagnosis come in, and what the heck does it mean?
Diagnosed right after he turned 2. And so what that means is he has on his X chromosome, which by the way is my X chromosome, he has a double copy of the MECP2 gene. And so genes in our body is what is used to make proteins. And so this particular gene makes or encodes the MECP2 protein, or MECP2, which is sometimes what people call it.
Okay.
So he has roughly a double concentration of a brain protein. So, say if yours and my concentration is 1, which is not a real thing, his is 2.
Okay.
And there's a related syndrome in females called Rett syndrome. And so in their case, they actually have a completely not, they have a mutated gene. So if you and I have one concentration of MECP2 or MECP2, the girls have somewhere closer to 0, the boys have somewhere closer to 2. I've heard it described as oil in a car. Too little is bad, too much is bad.
Okay. So what happens when a human brain has too much of this protein?
There are biochemical things that happen, which it's different. I don't think people necessarily know yet, and there's other folks that would have better information on that. I can tell you what that means, like symptomatically to kids. So in Bo's case, and we're quite fortunate, Bo is actually, he is severely affected by a genetic syndrome relative to a neurotypical kid, but relative to children that are affected by MECP2 duplication syndrome, he's certainly on like the milder end of it, for which we're very fortunate.
Good. You take your blessings where you can find them.
We can,
right?
yeah.
And to my statement earlier, right? There's the suffering is the same. There's no comparison of the suffering of who's got it better and worse. But I feel the same way on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst for what you can get with a cleft and 1 being the best. We're winning in the ones. Like we're, and it's still been absolutely brutal. Right.
Right.
But I'm grateful. I'm grateful that it is that way, but I'm also grateful that, those people that are out of 10 are still getting the help that they need.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
much out there. So, okay. So symptomatically, what does life look like for Bo, and what does that mean for you?
Sure. So Bo is a smart kid. He can understand everything we're saying. Which is amazing. And we didn't know that when he first got diagnosed. And that was the scariest time for me. It was like, you think you have a neurotypical child and things are not going perfectly. And literally, if I had to pick the worst thing that it could be, it would be that he had a cognitive issue. And that's what it was. So I think uninformed, informed by having a 10-year-old with it and being a scientist, that this protein affects motor planning a lot. And so speech is motor planning, walking is motor planning, running is motor planning, screwing a screwdriver in is motor planning.
Yep.
And so he's nonverbal. He uses an iPad to talk to us.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is great. He's awesome at it. He'll flip through all the pages on the iPad and find what he wants to say. He has this whole thing memorized, but it's still, he could never have as fluid of a conversation as you and I are having, because how could your hands, do that, right?
Right.
Especially on top of that,
motor.
Exactly. I was going to say,
delays.
Exactly. And so, so he can run. He does fall some. He's really funny. Like, I remember he had a therapist that was working with him when he was young, and I was just so worried about him when he was first diagnosed. And she's like, Kim, he's funny. And she's like, humor is some, like,
it requires intelligence.
Exactly.
It really, you need to be like the comedians on those stages that just whip out all things. I'm like, you must be one of the smartest people in the room to move and reply in that way. So,
right.
Agreed.
So I'll pull that thread a little bit further, which is, Bo has enough motor planning that we know he knows things. It has completely shifted my perspective on, other folks who, might be diagnosed with different things or might not have a diagnosis. And I think how you treat people and your brain will work around like whatever's going on. And so I think that folks need to be much more aware of the presence that everyone has, even if they can't verbalize or they can't move or whatever.
Yep.
And so
we're just energy in a body, right? And sometimes our body just doesn't work the way everyone else's does, whether that's our hands or our eyes or our executive functioning skills or our fine motor skills. And to kind of touch back a little bit to earlier in the conversation, where it's celebrities are just people and require compassion or deserve compassion too. Someone who spends their life in a wheelchair, they deserve compassion. Someone who cannot articulate their thoughts and words, they deserve compassion. They're just people, right? And if we're only looking at it as this, if the scientific process cannot get us to understand that every time we impact the same condition on all the different people, we will get different results.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, obviously, A and B questions, you're going to get similar results. But when we really dig into how we work, how we think, how we move, we're all different.
Yeah.
And, I get very discouraged when people talk about, oh, that person is learning disabled, or, and I said about my kid, my kid has special needs, right? And he does, but I had to stop letting that lead the conversation. Right. And just letting it be, my kid has needs, and guess what? So does yours.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it made it easier for me to see other people for where they are, and to say, under all of this, people have a journey and a story. My kid, bless his sweet, beautiful face, he's going to wear his on his face, right? He's going to have the scar there. And that's okay, because that's just part of his journey. He's not identified by that. And that was a shift that we had to make. We had to really think about how we want to talk about it, how we want to present it, how we want to normalize this, and also say, this kind of sucks. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Could use a little support and compassion, but I do have this, right? So how have you channeled those desires into helping him and other kids with MECP2? Trying to get it right.
Yeah.
What role do you play in the land of advocacy in this way? Because it is so important that people be seen for who they are and what they have, and not put in a basket or a bucket or put over somewhere else because they don't fit the typical.
So so we started the first part of this conversation, I think, talking about like the engineering and the science. And that is something where, like, we live near my family now. My father's been so influential there. Where I'll show the strong influence with Bo is certainly between my mom and my husband. And so I had terrible anxiety. I mean, just full on terrible anxiety when Bo was born and when he was diagnosed, and I was not in a good spot. So things look great now, but I was not in a good spot then. And I remember when
being honest about that and sharing. That's the hard stuff.
It was not
and
good.
It's not pretty.
No,
it's not pretty.
It was not pretty.
We so often don't want to talk about it because, aren't we supposed to be happy and joyful and just over the moon that we have this baby? Isn't it supposed to be the best?
Yeah.
And now that we're mothers, we don't complain, and it's scary, and I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, that's my self-talk from that time in my life. Okay, so all this chaos is happening in your head and in your heart, and you still had to show up for your son and your family, but it sounds like your family really had your back and showed up for you. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. I showed up, but it was not my full self at that point. And so, it was my mom that said to me right around the time of diagnosis, because there was about a 4-month period there where Bo was diagnosed as globally developmentally delayed. After we spent 2 years with a pediatrician just telling us he's fine, he was just premature, and me going, something's not right, but I don't know what's not right. And this is my first child. I'm 30 years old. I don't.
What do you know?
What do I know? Maybe he is just premature. I don't know. I mean, he was, right? To the time of diagnosis. And, my mom said, he's a child. He deserves all the dignity in the world that any other person deserves. And I was like, okay, not, I don't know if right at that point in time I said, okay, but now, yes, you're right, Mom.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I had one of those, kind of come to Jesus moments And, my son was a few months old, and my story was very sad and fear-based, and, not seeing beyond where we were and only feeling that fear, right? And it
Yeah.
was one of my very best friends, and she was on the podcast some time ago, and we actually talked about this, but she called and we had a conversation, and she was like, so we have to talk about this. And I was like, oh boy, but she called me out on it and basically said, you're telling this story about a child that nobody, no one else is seeing. They see
Right.
a beautiful child filled with hope and anticipation for the future. And, she didn't say it that, intensely, but it carried that message of stop seeing this for only the hard and start
Right.
seeing more of what there is, because there is so much more.
Right.
And it required compassion for myself and for him and really everyone involved. But man, what a difference it made.
Oh
So
yeah.
high
Yeah.
fives to the people in our lives who keep us honest, because sometimes we need a swift kick in the ass from
Mhm.
people who love us and trust us and can see more than what we're seeing and feeling in the moment. And that's the mentorship, right, that you talked about through your career, through school, through your businesses, and through parenting. Do you utilize your work and your floral arranging in your family life? Like, is everything very science-based? Is everything very technical? Does that support what Bo needs in his day-to-day? Because I imagine it's a lot of repetition and
Mhm.
consistency. Um, how does science fit into your home life?
There's even little funny things where my husband one day started laughing because when the kids do something that's probably not the safest in the world, I'll be like, let them do it. And I'll always say to the kids, what's your plan?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's like, he told me, he's like, my instinct is to tell him to be careful, but what use is that, right? My instinct is to say, what is your plan here?
Right.
And yeah, so
Because
go
if
ahead.
we're protecting them from everything, they'll never know how to protect
Right,
themselves.
right.
Right.
So
I
the
get
kids,
it, both sides, but
yeah, they, we could probably dial it back a little bit on my side and dial it forward a little bit on his side, but that's how we approach things. So I would say that as much as the way I interact and the way my normal way of doing things is science based, I would say the biggest shift for me and I think for our family was when I thought the whole thing was very unfair when Bo got diagnosed. It was like, this is so unfair.
same.
Um, and it was hard. I was a relatively young mom. I was one of the first of my friends to have kids. And, when folks start having kids, you're always comparing and because it's just a completely new thing, right?
Well, and that's what we do, right? We compare. We mark timelines, graduations, and marriages, and babies, and then we have the baby in a
Yeah,
2 week and a 4 week and a 6 week, and all these markers, right?
right.
When, to go back a few minutes again, we all grow differently
Yeah.
under different conditions with different needs. Um, and that is one thing, if I could go back and do it again, I would love to bring that perspective to my new mom experience of focus on his journey, be here, do this, celebrate his milestones, and don't worry about what the rest of the world is doing, because it's very easy to get pulled into that.
Yes. And I will also add to that, you would have likely never been forced to learn that lesson. And I would have never been forced to learn that lesson had we not been in that moment. Right. And
Correct.
so I still look around sometimes and, with my daughter, it's like, oh, this is kind of easy having kids that are neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't care. I mean, it is what it is. We rock it. Bo rocks it. Bo is like the toughest kid you'll ever meet. We have happy hour together as a family every single day because we've made it through another day.
Love it.
And that's what we do. So, yes, it would have been nicer to not have the pain and suffering, but I also don't see how we could have ever gotten to this spot without that pain and suffering.
Well, life is happiness and suffering. That's the reality, right? And it's a matter of what you do with it, and what we choose to do affects our kids. And it sounds like we've both kind of handled it in a similar way, because I too have a kid who is a rock star. He is an excellent patient. He is incredibly bright. He is beautiful and brilliant and funny and all the things, right? And he has this other part of him, but it made him, it made me, it made us who we are today. And what I can do with that matters. It's that having the experience and the opportunity to look behind the curtain and understand what compassion is, and to understand the impact of comparison, and to really let people be who they are and do what they do. And again, it all goes back to what is the process and how do we manage the conditions, right? I similarly felt angry, very like, haven't I done enough good in this world?
Oh yeah. So
That's my lot in life.
totally.
And I kind of cringe every time I say that, because I feel like that takes away so much from him. But at the same time, I had what he needed, right? I had what he needed to give him this life where he could thrive into the rock star that he is today. Not everyone may have had that, right?
No.
So I really tried to hold on to, like, at least I can give him what he needs, and follow through with that, because I can love him abundantly and I'll figure out the rest, right?
Totally.
And it's been nice. It has given me an opportunity to help mentor other moms, other families who have shared in this journey. Have you found that as well?
For sure. And we talk about the ills of social media, but there are also benefits of it. And so,
100%.
I was able to connect with other families that have the same syndrome. I've been able to connect with other families who have kids with needs. You can give that knowing look to someone of, we got kids that are somewhat atypical. Okay. And so I think, and sometimes what I often say is, Bo's 10 now. I've got 10 years of experience of this, which is a long time. It was really acutely hard at the beginning.
Agreed.
But now we see that even through the hard times, and even through the times we've had that have been relatively good over the last several years, that you just got to go through the process and put some time behind you, and you will make it better. Will the circumstances necessarily get better? No.
Nope.
But you're going to make it better.
But it's to my friend's telling of his story, and working with generals at the DoD, we cannot change the conditions, right? Like, I can't change that this is his journey, but I sure can make sure we stop and get something fun, like a dessert or like a fun breakfast every time we go to CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Right. And it's, how do I put on a fun podcast that he can listen to? How do I make it not suck for him and for me, so that we can focus our energy on the things that we really need to do that get us a more profitable outcome, which is a healthier, happier, independent child who will continue to learn how to use his, what he's been given on this planet.
Right.
And I really, maybe it's to wrap it up, maybe it's to open up another conversation, but it is so important that we understand that it is a condition-based life, right? And the conditions are going to come at us. And we have to do the best we can to draw analogies, to pull from experience, to be clear on what we want, what's important, so that it can continue on forward. I am fascinated by that aspect of you and how that comes up time and again in everything you say and everything that you do. You really are a scientist, very much so. But you are also just such a bright light in the direction of sustainability, both in our earth and planet, in the beauty of the flowers, and the relationships that you build and create. It's incredible. It's incredible. And to think all of this started at a wedding.
Yes.
I love it. So if you could, I love Tim Ferriss, so I like to ask this question a lot. I don't know if you listen to him. He's a podcaster and just incredible. But he asked the question at the end of many of his episodes of, if you could have a billboard anywhere, or as many of them as you want, to say one thing to the world, not necessarily promotional, not about, call branches and blooms, which you should. But what would you say to the world today, to an impact, a quote, a statement, a question? What would you say to the world today?
So I would say, and something that guides everything for me, is to set your non-negotiables, know what those are. And once you get those figured out, keep vibrating and just go for it.
I love
And
that.
try. Yeah.
I love that, right? Because if you don't plant the seed, you never get the harvest. But so many of us wait till the conditions are perfect to do just that, right? And whether it's leaving DC, shifting, career focus, building in a side business, fighting forward with love and compassion for your children, whatever the case may be, it all comes down to what's most important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And are you using the process? Are you thinking about what you know already and what's the plan, right?
Right.
Tell the kids before you jump,
Right.
what's the plan? Did you feel that you had fleshed that out before you jumped into the farm? Or was it kind of just, I'm going to do it and let's go?
So again, I set my non-negotiables, right? I set that one of my non-negotiables was I was going to have some level of information, right? Another one of my non-negotiables was that I had to have, my family had to be on board with it. Another non-negotiable was it had to positively impact my kids and my job and everything else, and it couldn't negatively impact those things. And certainly the sustainability aspects of it. But, beyond that, I think I'm a big picture person and I'll figure out the details. But as long as I know that I'm not putting us at any undue risk, I'm going to go for it.
I love it. I love it because why not, right? If you can anticipate and mitigate risk, and it's interesting and passionate and could be positive, again, and it's such a widespread approach that you take to the career that you have, the family that you have, the beliefs that you have, and to tie all that in together into something truly beautiful in what you're doing on the farm and with branches and blooms, is commendable and inspiring. And it has been such a pleasure to hear you talk about it and to explain the way you think. And I really, if you guys haven't checked out Branches and Blooms Designs on Instagram, you are missing out. It is stunning. It is different. And I can tell you firsthand, they are incredible. So Kim, other than Instagram at Branches and Blooms Designs, how do people find you?
So the best way is through my website. But the one thing I'll mention here too is what makes me so happy about Branches and Blooms is it brings joy to myself and it brings joy to my clients. And I have a talk about process, I'll wrap it up. I have a pretty strong process where I end up working with incredible people like the couple that you and I, that brought us together.
Yep.
And, I just want to bring joy to them. And at the same time, bringing joy to having that augmentative joy. And so, reach out through my website. I run a pretty limited schedule a year, about 10 to 11 weddings a year, because that meets my non-negotiables of being able to be a good mom and being able to do a good job at my day job. And I'd love to connect with folks.
Well, I will say that, yes, you are creating joy by your own renourishment to create sustainable joy. And the ancient Egyptians used to say, or maybe they still say it, I guess, and translation through people like me, but they didn't believe in the pearly gates upon your death. What they believed is that upon your death, you're asked two questions, and it's, in your time on earth, did you find joy and did you give joy? Ooh. And the answer to those two questions not only is foundational to how I've, created my business, Joy Inc., but the answer to those questions is how you spend your time in eternity, whether it's in heaven or hell, however you want to describe it. So I see that as when you find joy and you give joy, that is living eternally in heaven and bliss. And when we can do that here on earth, I think we are absolutely winning. So thank you, my darling, for sharing your wins with us. You have found joy and given it to me and all of our listeners here today. And I thank you for making the world a safer and more beautiful and sustainable place. And I say this a lot to my clients, but I'll say it to you today. Go be so fabulous, the world can't stand it.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I'll talk to you real soon.
Yeah, thank you. And we did not plan this ending. This actually happened, this joy thing. So I love that. I love it to tie it up with that bow. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate
you said
the
that's the way the
questions.
world works, right? You put it out there and you just start vibing and you just make it go, and you trust the process. So
all right. Well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I will talk to you soon, and I will look forward to seeing lots more beautiful designs from Branches and Blooms.
Thank you.
Right. I'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.
All right.
And that's a wrap on another episode of And All the Things. If you enjoyed today's show, please like and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you really liked it, please go ahead and rate it. Then think about who in your life might also need to hear it and any of the other episodes we have shared. Then share it with them. When you find something meaningful, something valuable, you've got to share it and pay it forward to those you care for. Thanks for joining us, and follow along on Instagram at myjoycoach. And as always, make it a great day.